Hello and welcome to my first Infinity N4 battle report. It will be between my army Tunguska and my opponent's army military orders. The mission is Superiority and it is at 150 points. So Superiority is an ITS-14 direct action mission. It has no classified objectives, high value targets and no extra terrain rules. The winner of the mission is whoever scores the most objective points at the end of the game. Now for this mission there are three ways to score objective points. The first one is at the end of each round. If you dominate more quadrants than your opponent, then you score 2 objective points and you get 2 points per round if you do meet the requirements. At the end of the game you also get 1 objective point up to a maximum of 3 for every console you activate. And also at the end of the game, if you have a key ops in a dominated zone of operations, you get 1 extra objective point. Now specialist troopers are the only ones who can activate a console. I have excluded the chain of command skill because personally I think it is not a specialist skill per se, more a skill used for command and control of an army, because it is used to negate the effects of being in loss of lieutenant situation. So I've chosen not to include it in this mission rule for this battle report. However, the rest of the specialist troopers remain, which are hackers, doctors, engineers, forward observers, paramedics, and troopers with the specialist operative skill. So we're playing 150 points and we'll be going off the game table, which is on the left. It is 24 inches in width and 32 inches in length. And we're playing 150 points because we only have the starter box sets to play with, which all are generally 150 points in size. And as we're getting back into the game, it's a good size to get used to all the mechanics and fundamentals of Infinity N4. So this is the game table we played on. This is the photo of the map that I've taken. As you can see, each console is represented by a console token. The deployment zones are 8 inches in depth and the midfield is 16 inches in width. Sorry, 16 inches from deployment zone to deployment zone. So if you manage to watch my ranged weapons tactical video, you'll understand that the preferred weapons for this are short and medium range weapons. Long range weapons are sort of unnecessary because the length of the board is 32 inches and a HMG certainly covers one end of the table to the other. This is my army list for Tunguska. It's 150 points, 1.5 support weapon cost. It consists of a fire team core, which allows me to have both the size and composition bonuses, which means I get +1 burst for the active miniature and in reactive turn for all miniatures, +3 to ballistic skill and 6th sense. And my core fire team consists of a Securitate lieutenant, a Securitate paramedic, Securitate with a repeater, and a Securitate with a HMG. And I have a special character, Universo Infinity, which fills it out to a pure core fire team. Now the Securitate with HMG is there for ARO duty and to help provide a bit of extra heavy firepower. The repeater has a boarding shotgun, and the repeater is there to help extend the hacker's network, so the hacker can do their job through repeaters and not put themselves in a vulnerable position using their own zone of control. The paramedic and Yelena Kovac are essentially the specialists that can push forward to claim objectives. And the paramedic with its whip 14 actually is quite reliable in previous games that I've played. Yelena Kovac is an interesting character. It seems that her role is a niche role in terms of being what I'd consider a midfield skirmisher hunter. She has an X-visor which helps reduce the negative range bands of a breaker combi rifle, and a lot of skirmishers do not have a high BTS or a high armor. She has sensor, so you can use that to reveal any camo tokens within the zone of control by passing a whip roll. And even if you choose not to, having the sensor skill adds an automatic +6 to her whip, so 14 + 6 is 20, so she's guaranteed to discover and pass her discover rolls when identifying any camo token. And the chain cult there is an intuitive template weapon, so if she does happen to be hunting midfield skirmisher camo targets, instead of having to discover first, she can just do an intuitive attack with the chain cult, and whip 14 is quite high, so there's a good probability of passing that intuitive attack. The rest of my army consists of an interventor. They have a combi rifle, fast panda, and a hacking device plus, and this basically just gives the extra addition of the white noise zone, which I'd like to try eventually, moving up the fire team and use the repeater to put in a white noise zone to counter multi-spectral visors, but I won't be encountering any in this mission. And the interventor basically just sits back in the deployment zone in total cover and just does all the hacking through the repeaters of the Securitate and the Saliot Zond. And the Saliot Zond is quite survivable. It's got armor 2, BTS 3, and that's why I sort of chose it, because the Flashpulse bot doesn't have any armor, and so it's much more vulnerable. And it has a useful equipment, which is a repeater and a deactivator. The repeater is obviously quite good, and I'll use that to help support my hacker network. And the repeater can be useful for removing discovered mines out the way. And its final support unit will be the Hollow Man, which is a heavy infantry unit. And it has a multi-rifle, chain cult, and pitcher, breaker pistol, and close combat weapon. So I chose this one because the pitchers can also help extend my hacker network by shooting pitches into the midfield and cover the midfield with my repeater network. Because the repeater on the Securitate and the Saliot Zond are obviously in my deployment zone, so can only extend so far, but by shooting pitches further I can cover the whole midfield effectively if I choose to. And the multi-rifle just allows for different ammunition options against heavier targets, heavy infantry targets and such. And here's my opponent's army list. So as you can see, they have the keynote of here is the 3 Trinitarians, which are all Fort Observers, so that's very essential specialist role. And because they're all infiltration and camouflage, there's pretty much these are a good tool or a good trooper, to be out in the midfield and claim objectives early on, and to hold the midfield, especially since they all have shock mines. And you can see one of them is a mine layer, so they get to deploy camouflage in the midfield with a mine already out. Now my opponent has 2 Tectonic Knights, one is a Lieutenant and the other is an NCO. And the NCO will be used quite well in this with a Spitfire to provide heavy firepower towards my army. The Trauma Doc, probably the more reliable trooper to help revive unconscious managers, and also as another specialist if need be. And the Raven Eye, because they are also a specialist and they're good at securing the deployment zone with their mine layer skill. Okay, so the game. We both rolled for the initiative roll, with my opponent scoring higher than me and winning the roll. My opponent chose initiative and take the first turn. I kept deployment and chose to deploy second. Now we just cover the deployment phase. This is my opponent's deployment zone. Their troopers are all forward onto the deployment edge and ready to rush forward into the midfield. There are plenty of camo tokens in the midfield, most likely the Trinitarians. And the Trauma Doc is my opponent's key op for this scenario. My deployment zone, I deployed my Securitate core on the left flank with a HMG on the building for ARO duty. He has good line of fire over both consoles in my half of the midfield and can also shoot to my opponent's half of the midfield. The Saliot Zond is prone on the roof, ready to push forward into the right quadrant, and extend my repeater zone for that area. My interventor is hidden far back to focus on hacking through repeaters, which are on my Zond, my Saliot Zond, and my Securitat. And the Holoman is ready to support my right flank and to counter any opponent's plans, and also to fire any pitches into the midfield if possible. And for this scenario, I make my Securitat Lieutenant my key ops. And I get to spend a command token to remove 2 regular orders from my opponent's order pool for this first round. So my opponent goes first. My opponent spends an impetuous order on the Teutonic Knight with a Spitfire, and they declare move. And then move over to the right. I'll get an ARO and I declare BS attack from my Securitat with a HMG, and my opponent declares BS attack against my HMG. And as the result, my opponent takes 1 wound off their Teutonic Knight. They spend their other impetuous order on the Teutonic Knight with light shotgun, and they move. And because I cannot see anything, I get no ARO in return and move again, and they just sort of stay there. Now my opponent spends 1 regular order and they activate the camo token on the right side of the field, and they move into silhouette contact with their console. I still do not see anything. I have line of fire, so I get no ARO, and they declare they hack the console, and my opponent passes the whip roll, and they obviously reveal themselves to be a Trinitarian. My opponent spends a 2nd regular order on the camo token on the left side, and they activate that and move that token into silhouette contact with the console. I still have no ARO, and they declare hack console for the second half of their order, and they pass the whip roll and reveal themselves to be a Trinitarian. The third regular order is spent, and they activate the trauma dock, and he moves into silhouette contact with the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire. Now I get no ARO, and they declare Doctor Short Skill, and they pass a whip roll, and the Teutonic Knight gains 1 wound, bringing it back up to 2 wounds. Now they spend their Lieutenant order, and they activate the Teutonic Knight with their Spitfire, because it has an NCO special skill, and they declare move and BS attack. And they just duck out and come back. I declare an BS attack with my HMG Securitat, and they obviously shoot my HMG Securitat. And I score a hit on their Teutonic Knight, however they pass their armor roll. On their 4th order, they activate the camo token that's in the middle, which is on the stairs of the central building. And they move into silhouette contact with the console in my zone and move back to the base of the stairs. I choose to delay my ARO to see what happens, and they declare to hack the console, and the camo token reveals itself to be a Trinitarian. And I get to declare a 2nd ARO, and I declare BS attack with my HMG. Now they pass their whip roll, and I score 1 hit. And sorry, I just skipped forward somehow. Okay. Anyway, their last regular order, they activate their Trinitarian. That was in the base contact. I guess obviously I didn't do anything. I think they passed their arm roll. They declare place deployable, and I declare I get an ARO from the HMG Securitat, and I choose Spotlight from my hacker, my interventor. and their second skill is a BS attack against my HMG using a boarding shotgun. So my opponent passes their BS roll, scoring 1 critical and 1 hit, and I have to perform 3 armor rolls on my Securitate HMG. I save 1 and fail 2, so I take 2 wounds and enter the dead state, and I remove my Securitate from the game table. My hacker passes my whip roll, and the Trinitarian enters the targeted state. And this is the end of my opponent's first turn. So now my turn for round 1. I spend 1 command token to reform the fire team, and this is because the fire team leader was the HMG who was killed, and I reform the fire team with Yelena Kovac as the fire team leader. I spend run regular order and I activate the Securitate fire team, and I declare move, but I only choose Yelena Kovac to move to the edge of the building and gain line of fire to the Trinitarian in my midfield. The Trinitarian declares dodge, and then I declare BS attack against the Trinitarian. So I score a 1 hit and my opponent passes their armor roll. My opponent chooses to fail the guts roll and move 2 inches into total cover up to the stairs. For my second regular order, I activate the Saliot Zon drone. And it's already prone, so I just declare it to move 2 inches into the midfield and into the first quadrant. The Trinitarian declares a dodge for the ARO, the one in the midfield, my midfield, and I just declare idle for my next short skill, and my opponent fails their dodge roll. For my third regular order, I activate the fire team, and I declare move. There's nil ARO generated because the Trinitarian up the top of the image there is actually up the stairs and cannot draw a line of fire. And I choose Yelena, because she's the team leader, to discover the deployed camo token near the base of the stairs. Now I pass my whip roll because I get +3 to discover in a pure composition fire team, and because I have the sensor skill, it automatically provides a +6 whip for discover rolls. So I pretty much pass the roll and discover the camo token, and it is a shock mine. So now it's no longer camouflage, it's on the table as a mine. I spend my fourth regular order and activate the fire team again, and I declare move. And the Trinitarian on my opponent's side of the board, on her right, declares dodge, and I declare move again. My fire team ends up here, and my opponent fails their physical rolls. For my fifth order, I again declare to activate the fire team, and I make the paramedic the fire team leader, and it moves into silhouette contact with the console and back into cover. The Trinitarian that's in the targeted state declares reset. The Teutonic Light Shotgun declares dodge. And the Trinitarian on my opponent's right side declares dodge as well, and I choose to hack the console with the paramedic. So I pass the whip roll and activate my console, and the opponent passes their whip roll for their reset and is no longer declared targeted, and the Trinitarian fails the dodge roll and stays there. However, the Teutonic Knight passes the dodge roll, and after some thinking decides to keep the Teutonic Knight where it is because it's out of line of fire and just outside of repeater range. Well, it's within repeater range, but she just decides to keep it there because it's the safer option. And for my sixth order, I activate my Hollow Man, and he moves. The Trinitarian on my opponent's left declares a BS attack, and I declare BS attack back against my opponent's Trinitarian. So they score 1 hit on my Hollow Man, and I pass my armor roll. And because I'm religious, I don't have to pass the guts roll, I can just stay there, so I choose to stay there. For my 7th and final regular order, I activate my Interventor. And I choose Carbonite against my opponent's Teutonic Knight with Light Shotgun, because it's within range of my Securitate repeater. They declare reset, and then I declare idle for my second half. So I pass my whip, scoring 1 hit, and my opponent fails a reset roll. My opponent makes 2 BTS save rolls, which both pass, and so they do not enter the immobilized B state. And this is a result of my first turn. As you can see, we both dominate 2 quadrants, and because it's equal amount, no objective points are scored, and we can only score more if one of us has one more zone of operations dominated than the other. And as you can see, now my opponent's second round. So they spend 1 regular order, activate their Trinitarian in the center, and they declare move, and they move further up the stairs. I still have no arrows, and they declare move again and go prone and move 2 inches. Spend their second regular order on the same Trinitarian. This time they declare move and stand up and move to the edge next to my fire team. My Securitate with Repeater and Lieutenant declare, well, at this stage I'm just thinking about declaring dodge, and then I'm also thinking about declaring ballistic attack from Elena and the Paramedic. Now obviously in the rules, the majority of the AROs has to be the fire team's ARO, and I'd rather take the risk and declare BS attack because I'd rather remove the threat of the Trinitarian than just dodge or fail to dodge and lose miniatures. So I decide to use BS attack for my ARO for the fire team, and only Elena Kovac and the Paramedic can shoot back because they're facing the opponent. My Repeater and Lieutenant are facing away from the Trinitarian, so I cannot get a BS attack back, so I'm just taking the risk. And my opponent declares BS attack with a Trinitarian and using their boarding shotgun in blast mode. So that's the 2 that are being hit, my Repeater and Lieutenant. And my opponent places the template twice over my Securitate with Repeater and my Securitate Lieutenant. Now Elena Kovac returns fire with a Chain Colt and the Paramedic with the Combi Rifle. Now both of them get 2 burst in ARO. So I get 2 templates from Elena, and my Paramedic out of the 2 burst only scores 1 hit against the Trinitarian. Now my Securitate with Repeater and Lieutenant both fail the armor rolls and enter the dead state removed from play. The Trinitarian passes all their arm rolls. And because my Lieutenant is killed, I declare that, and it puts me in loss of Lieutenant for my active turn. So 3rd regular order is spent, and my opponent activates the Trinitarian on the left, and they declare move. They move further up. I still get nil AROs because I have no one that can see that, and they declare move again to the front there. They spend their 4th regular order and activate the same Trinitarian, and they declare move. I still have no line of fire and have no arrow, and they choose to place a deployable. They declare their 5th, sorry, they activate so they spend their 5th regular order and activate the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire, and they declare move. And that's the path they take, 6 inches. I declare BS attack with Yelena Kovac and my Securitate paramedic, and my opponent declares BS attack back and puts 2 shots on Yelena and 2 shots on the paramedic. And they're off screen in the photo, but that's roughly where they are in position. Now, Yelena and the paramedic return with 1 burst each, because now they're no longer a coherent fire team. And I choose the combi rifle for my paramedic and the breaker combi rifle for Yelena. Now the paramedic fouls their BS rolls, and Yelena scores a critical hit for her BS roll. My opponent's Teutonic Knight passes their BS roll against the paramedic, but fails against Yelena. So my critical hits. I pass both my arm rolls for my paramedic and choose to fail my guts roll and go prone. The Teutonic Knight passes both the BTS rolls, and the TK fails the guts roll for a religious troop and remains where it is. The 6th regular order activates Teutonic Knight with Spitfire again and moves into silhouette contact with the central building. I have no arrows this time, and my opponent declares idle for the remaining half of their order. Activate a regular order again, activate the same Teutonic Knight with Spitfire, and they declare climb, which is an entire order skill, up onto their central building. And I get no arrows still. My opponent spends the Lieutenant order on the same Teutonic Knight again, using the NCO skill. And they go prone and move up to 2 inches. I have no line of fire, so I have nothing to shoot with. And they're staying prone, they move another 2 inches. Now they come into repeater range of my Zond, and so I declare Carbonite with my Hacker. I pass my whip roll, and the Teutonic Knight makes 2 BTS rolls. One of them passes, one of them fails, and so my opponent enters the immobilized B state. And that's the end of my opponent's turn. As you can see, this is my paramedic and Yelena. My Solid Zond, which is the repeater range, it just clips halfway through the base. Actually, no, just behind it, and so that declares me the arrow to hack. Now, my round 2. Now, because I lost my Securitate Lieutenant my opponent's active turn, I'm in loss of Lieutenant situation, so I only have 2 regular orders, which are generated from my Securitate because they have the veteran skill, and the remaining miniatures have 3 irregular orders in total, one for my Holoman, my Interventor, and my Saliot Zond. So I spend 1 regular order and activate Yelena. I declare idle. Now my opponent Trinitarian, the one in the middle on the roof, declares BS attack back with their boarding shotgun and blast mode, and the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire will declare a reset, and I declare BS attack back with the Chain Colt. So that's who I'm targeting. Now the Spitfire passes a whip roll to reset, and so they're no longer in immobilized B. I fire 2 templates up at the Trinitarian, and my opponent places 1 back against mine, and unfortunately my paramedic is also under the template. So Yelena fails the arm roll and ends up in the unconscious state, and the Trinitarian passes 1 armor roll but fails the other and enters the unconscious state as well. And my paramedic passes the arm roll, so there's no issues there. Next, I spend a command token and convert the Saliot Zond's irregular order into a regular order, allowing me to have 2 regular orders remaining. Now I use the Interventor's irregular order to activate the Interventor. I move 0 inches, and my opponent declares reset with a Tectonic Knight, because I declare Carbonite on that Tectonic Knight. So the one up here, as you can see, with the green lightning arrow. So I pass my whip roll. However, my opponent scores higher on their whip roll, means that they win the face-to-face, and they apply the reset skill. So the immobilized B effect doesn't apply. Spending the irregular order for the Hollow Man on the Hollow Man, I activate him, and I declare 0 inches to move. My opponent declares nil, and I declare BS attack against the Shock Mine. So I pass my BS roll and score 2 hits with a multi-rifle using armor-piercing ammunition, and the mine fails both arm rolls and is removed from the game table. And I'm happy with this because this frees me up to possibly move my Hollow Man into the right quadrant. That was the plan anyway. Now with my one of my 2 regular orders, I spend my second and regular order and activate the Hollow Man again. I declare move, so I move up here, and then the Trinitarian in my quadrant declares dodge, and I declare BS attack against the Trinitarian. So I use the multi-rifle using shock ammunition. My opponent fails the physical roll to dodge, and I score 1 hit out of 3. The Trinitarian fails the arm roll, enters a dead state, and is removed from the game table. In my last regular order, I activate the Securitate Paramedic, and while they're prone, I move into silhouette contact with Elena and back again. The Tectonic Knight with Spitfire declares dodge, and I choose to use Medikit when in silhouette contact with Elena. So the Tectonic Knight passes a physical roll and moves to the edge of the roof on the building, and Yelena fails her physical roll and loses 1 wound, entering the dead state, and is removed from the game table. So this is the end of my round. And from here, I get 0 objective points, while my opponent gets 2 because they dominate 3 zone of operations to my 1. So I dominate this quadrant with my paramedic, and because the Tectonic Knight is here, it's more expensive than my Salidzon, so they dominate that quadrant plus their 2 quadrants up the back there. So my opponent gets 2 objective points while I score none. Okay, my opponent's round 3. So they spend their 1 first regular order and activate the Ravenite Officer, and they declare move. I have no arrows, and they declare move again into base contact with the central building. The second regular order, they activate the Ravenite Officer again and declare climb, which is an entire order, and they place up on the roof, and I still have no arrows. The third order, they activate the Ravenite again, and they declare move, go prone, and then move 2 inches. And I declare dodge with my Securitate Paramedic, and while they're still prone, they move 2 inches again to the wall. And I pass my physical roll and move 1 inch. Fourth regular order, my opponent activates the Trinitarian on the right flank, and they declare move. I have no arrows available, and they declare move again, and they move alongside the right flank of the red building. And that's the end of my opponent's turn there. And what's interesting is my opponent declares that finish with a turn, which is a big risk. And as you can see, the Trinitarian on the right hand side of the right building is in my quadrant, so my opponent has all 4 quadrants under their control, and I think that's why they made the decision to quit their turn. So my opponent had the Lieutenant Order remaining and 1 regular order remaining. Now for my round 3, I had to stop and come up with a plan, and hopefully it succeeded, which it did to a degree, but we'll go through it. So I spent my first regular order. Okay, so by the way, I had to nominate a lieutenant at the end of my second turn, and it happens to be my interventor down in the bottom right corner. So now my interventor is a new lieutenant for this round. So I activate my first regular order and activate my Hollow Man. Now he has super jump special skill, which means that the jump skill is not an entire order, it becomes a short movement skill. So I declare jump, and I jump up into the building, onto the parapet there to get cover. My opponent declares a BS attack from the Trinitarian, and I declare BS attack again at the Trinitarian. That's the one hiding behind the red building over there. So I use the multi-rifle with shock ammunition, and I pass my BS rolls with 1 critical and 1 success. My opponent fails all the arm rolls, and the Trinitarian enters a dead state and is removed from play. I activate my second regular order and activate the Hollow Man again. Then I declare jump, and I jump down into the quadrant. My opponent's Raven officer declares dodge, and I declare move, and I move into base contact with the red building. Now the Raven fails his physical roll to dodge and just stays there. I spend my lieutenant order and activate my interventor, and I just declare move of 0 inches. And my opponent declares reset for the Teutonic Knight with a Spitfire, and I declare Carbonite on the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire. So my opponent passes a whip roll and cancels my successes. I rolled 2 7s and my opponent rolled 1 8, so they win that face-to-face roll. I spend my third regular order and activate my Hollow Man again, and I declare jump, and I jump up onto the building. My opponent, and I didn't see this at the time, their Teutonic Knight with light shotgun declares an ARO, which is a BS attack, and they use their Panzerfaust. I declare a BS attack with armor piercing ammunition at the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire on the center of the building. Now the Teutonic Knight scores 1 hit against me, and I score 2 hits against the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire. So I'll make 3 armor rolls, and I pass all of them. And the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire makes 2 armor rolls and fails both and enters a dead state and is removed from play. For my final order, I activate my Hollow Man again and move up closer to the parapet towards my opponent's deployment zone. Now, there's a few AROs that happen here. So the mine on the stairs, which you'll see up here, that actually turns out to be a mine. It explodes because I'm within its detonation zone. The Teutonic Knight with light shotgun fires another Panzerfaust at my Hollow Man, and the Trauma Doc, who is the Cheops, also declares BS attack. So the Lieutenant Teutonic Knight, which is the light shotgun behind the building, which you can't see, has line of fire there, and the paramedic, the Trauma Doc declares an attack. And then after all that, I declare BS attack against the Trauma Doc. So now, obviously the mine explodes, and the way we go through is we do the face-to-face roll with the Hollow Man and the Trauma Doc, because that's who I'm engaging. So I fail all my BS rolls, and the Trauma Doc scores 1 hit against me. However, I pass my armor roll. The normal roll for the Panzerfaust scores a hit. I fail my armor roll and lose 1 wound. And the Mine Strike order hits because it's a template weapon, but I do pass my armor roll. And yep, you can see I'm targeting the Trauma Doc there. And that is the end of my round 3, and this is the top-down perspective to the midfield. So at the end of round 3, I dominate 3 zone of operations to my opponent's 1, and I gain 2 objective points for this round. So just a quick summary of the endgame. The photo's a bit slanted, but you'll see that this zone is actually in the complete zone. If it was a bit more vertical, you'll see that 98% of the base is actually in this quadrant. This Hollow Man is actually just on the inside here. Obviously the photo is a bit slanted, so it's hard to tell. It turns out my Paramedic is a couple of more points, 2 more points more expensive than the Ravenite. Hollow Man is obviously more expensive than the Cheops, so I dominate this zone, and dominate this zone, and I dominate this zone because I remove the Teutonic Knight with the Spitfire. My opponent has a Teutonic Knight with a light shotgun in here, so they dominate that zone. So I got 3 to their 1. However, at the end of the game, my opponent controls 3 consoles, this one, and this one, and I only control 1, so they'll get extra points for that. Okay, now I will go through the after action review of the game. So first of all, the results. So here's the score for objective points per round and end of the game. For round 1, we score neither objective points. For round 2, my opponent scores 2 for having more quadrants. Round 3, I score 2 for having more quadrants. At the end of the game, my opponent scores 3 consoles and I score 1, and none of our Cheops are in a dominant zone of operations. So the total brings it to 3-5 with my opponent winning, and the remaining army points, I still have 80 points left and my opponent has 45. So based on objective points alone, my opponent wins this game. So now I'll go through the lessons that I learned. So firstly, I'll go through what are the actions or decisions I made to keep for future games. So having a heavy weapon on ARO duty helps to counter threats or advances from my opponent, and it offers me some board control in the midfield. I think my deployment was very good. The deployment allowed me to be efficient with my orders. I moved my troopers where I needed them. For example, the Salit Zond was deployed on top of the building, prone, and it could move into my quadrant without being targeted and provide repeater range over that part of the midfield on my right flank. And next I will go through the things that I need to improve. So, I should have made my fire team leader a different Securitat. Making the HMG the leader was a poor decision because when it was killed I had to spend a command token to reactivate the fire team. This was my fault because I wanted to be aggressive with my fire team in my turn, and I did not consider losing my HMG in the first turn. Afterwards, I realised I had many more opportunities to use hacking programs in ARO. I forgot that I had repeaters covering the midfield. I only remembered having the option to hack during my active turns and not my reactive turns. So I need to include that in my ARO thing to remind myself that I need to hack more often. And during round 2, my opponent's Trinitarian that moved up onto the roof of the central building fired down and from behind my Securitat with the repeater and my Securitat lieutenant, using their boarding shotgun in blast mode. I did not think my opponent would actually move up onto the roof. I was planning on my opponent using the Teutonic Knight with Spitfire aggressively and move around on the ground. Hence I set up my fire team covering the approach on my left flank. So it was good thinking on my opponent's behalf to use the vertical space to achieve some attacks. If I had kept my Securitat facing the opponent's table edge, I would have had more BS attacks in ARO and providing me with more chances of removing that Trinitarian. So some of the noticeable threats during the game: mines and shotguns in blast mode. So template weapons are very powerful on a small game table for 150 points. There's actually little room for maneuvering around such obstacles. Mines have to be discovered and attacked for me in order to move forwards, and this can expend many orders and delay any movement. It was a good thing having Yelena Kovac rolls on a D20 or less to discover, meaning that I have a very high chance of passing all my discover rolls, allowing me to target the mines in the following order. Shotguns in blast mode are very powerful and are very threatening because they can use the small teardrop template, and it's very effective because there's no need to roll a BS roll to hit. template is an automatic hit, and template's also dangerous because you do not get any bonuses from partial cover. Now, some lessons learned from my opponent. What do we have here? Okay, so my opponent replaced their Order Sergeant Hacker with another Trinitarian, making a total of 3 Trinitarians in the list. Using the Trinitarian's skill of laying mines around the midfield allowed for a strong board control and wasted basically my orders during my active turn. Moving the Trinitarian up onto the roof of the central building allowed my opponent to gain another advantage to shoot down and kill my fire team. Doing so allowed for an easy kill of 2 of my Securitate. Choosing initiative for the Lieutenant's role allowed my opponent to make use of the camo marker state of her Trinitarians and hack 3 consoles early in the game, and to lay mines and secure her half of the midfield, putting herself in a good position for the rest of the game. Now, things my opponent identified that needs improving. Knowing that nomads are strong in hacking, not to rely on heavy infantry to push forward. This is because heavy infantry are vulnerable to hacking and can waste a lot of orders trying to reset or to avoid most of the battlefield. Having heavy infantry isolated or immobilized can make heavy infantry ineffective, and my opponent would consider using medium infantry or light infantry, so for example a Black Friar, to provide support to troops. And so Teutonic Knights have less chance of shooting back against the fire team with the composition bonuses. Dodging may be better because the Teutonic Knights are very high in dodging ability, the +3 to the physical rolls and +1 inch to dodge. And when pushing the Trinitarians forward, need some sort of support weapon to threaten the opponent with. This will make the opponent have to either deal with the Trinitarians or the support weapon, and this may assist with the Trinitarians re-entering the camouflage state and to move freely around the battlefield. Okay, so that's the end of my first battle report. Let me know what you think of the game and what my opponent and I could have done better during the game, or anything else that you've noticed or may not have done during the game. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.